be strong. Have a strong mind. Have a strong heart. Have a strong body. Run. Get yourself physically strong, mentally strong, spiritually strong. You could do anything, no matter what it is. My name is Peter MacDonald Sr. That spells with M-A-C Donald, not M-C Donald. A lot of times people mistake me for McDonald hamburger type McDonald. No. My clan is Hashkahatso. It's yucca fruit. And born for Petani, the ones within themselves. And my grandfather on my father's side is, let me go back to the grandfather on my mother's side, the Shihi. And of course, my grandfather, and I'm married into a Todechini clan. My wife is Todechini, so all my kids, their first clan is Todechini, and they're born for Askansoho.
Reflecting on his life, MacDonald shares of his childhood and family.
I was born actually sometime in May or June 1928, but BIA being what they were, it gave me a birthday of December 16th. I don't know why. See, Navajo, we never celebrated birthdays. There's no such thing as birthday cake or anything. My parents were from Four Corners area, Tisnazpas, and they were all mostly livestock people. Herding sheep, have few cows, horses, and farm. Pretty much self-sufficient in that fashion, having animals, livestock, as well as farming. And they all live within that Four Corners area, sometimes drifting into Utah and summertime up on the mountains, and then spend the winter in Utah.
MacDonald grew up in the Four Corners area, where his view of the world was shaped by the Four Sacred Mountains.
What I realized when I first became aware of the world in which I was in, right around Tisnazpas, Four Corners area, was that this was a Navajo world, that we were the only ones here. And all the stories that I heard being told to us, how we came from the first world, second, third, fourth, this world here, and how the Four Sacred Mountains were built, placed by the holy people. The eastern one, Sierra Blanca in Colorado, and Mount Taylor in New Mexico, San Francisco Peaks, Tocosli, Western Mountain, and the Benza, La Plata Mountain in Colorado. These four sacred mountains were placed as sort of like a boundary for Navajo Nation. All those mountains were protected us, and all our prayers and songs mentioned those mountains all the time in clockwise fashion.
Though he went on to a position of leadership, MacDonald's early aspirations were not focused on public service.
My grandfather had a dump truck, and he used to haul coal to boarding schools and get paid. So I know that if you have the dump truck, you could use it to get paid and have money to buy things. So those are all going through my mind as what I want to be. I like to either work in this office or own a truck, dump truck. It never crossed my mind I want to get a college degree or I want to be a doctor or an engineer or nothing. That was I never saw it, never heard of it, and so I never aspired to be any of those, or aspired to be a leader of any kind. Although my grandfather, Deshnatlachish Chile, the second chairman of the Navajo Nation, was a chairman, was a leader. That didn't faze me one bit, except I know he's a leader, and fine, there are medicine men, different kinds of medicine men. There are leaders, there are orators, that I didn't want to aspire to any of that. My vision was working in an office and owning a dump truck.
MacDonald found that he enjoyed school, specifically math, but boarding school was not a welcoming place.
I dropped out of school after finishing sixth grade. I was going to Shipwreck boarding school. Boarding school was very tough, very rough. They were mean. Not only the students, bigger students were mean, but the faculty at the school, Bureau of Indian Affairs boarding schools, were very mean as well. So I just dropped out when I was in sixth grade. And my grandfather wanted me to be a medicine man. So I stayed with him for one whole year, learning to be a medicine man, and I dropped out of that school. So I started looking for work. Well, this was right in the middle of World War II. So I decided to join the Marines, and simply because I saw some of my fellow Navajos from Tisnazpas area join the Marines. They come home with a beautiful blue Marine Corps uniform, and I want to wear a uniform like that.
Growing up on the remote Navajo reservation, contact with the outside world was limited.
The only sense of another civilization was a trading post at Tisnazpas, where we see a strange being, white skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and talks a language they don't understand. That was Belacana in Navajo. And that Belacana is not a Navajo, almost like not a human being. It's something else. We're the only human being, Diné. We're Navajos. So we stay at distance. We suspected that they can do things we cannot do.
Peter gained a new outlook on those around him, as well as himself, while in boot camp.
When I was in boot camp, and we get letters from home, and one mail call, I had this blonde-headed kid, blue-eyed guy, take me to the side in the barracks, San Diego. And he says, I got this letter from home. Can you read it for me? I was puzzled because not too long ago, I was on a reservation and going to school, and I was learning the English language, learn how to write it, and learn how to read it. So I said, okay, give it to me. And I read it to him, and he said, oh, thank you. So he went away. Now I feel all right. So he was curious whether I could read or not, and I showed him I could read. The next day, he comes to me again, and he asks, can you write a letter home for me? That really changed 180 degrees from how I felt about Peter MacDonald.
Peter explains the main reason the Navajo Code was successful in World War II.
Stories after stories we've been told from the time you're 3 years old all the way up to you're 30 years old. And the stories get longer, get more complicated. As kids, mostly coyote stories. Every time you're told a story, like 5 years old, whatever story you're told, you have to repeat it. And at night, you're all laying there, and okay, you tell the story. The way it was told to you, it's got to be exactly the way they told you. The same words that was used and the manner in which it was used. So that you're graduating in a way. Once you tell it just the way it was always told, then you graduate from that story to go to the next story. And as you get older, the stories get longer. And eventually you get into prayers, the prayers that you hear medicine men repeat. And they're very long, and they're orderly arranged. Same with the songs, sacred songs. So that's the early education. A lot of memory, and you got to, because Navajo is not a written language, so you can't write it down, you can't read. And America was looking for a code that the enemy in the Pacific would not understand, cannot break. So they came upon the Navajo language, and Navajo language was then used to create a code that only 400 of us would know and understand. And if a Navajo is captured from here or listening, would not even know what we're talking about. That's how the code was structured. Looking back as to why was the code so successful, one of the reasons it was so successful is that it it was all verbal. Number one, subject to memory only. We didn't have a notebook, anything like that, and all the code names and code words were locked up under lock and key because it's a top secret. Just the 400 of us know what the code words were. And the reason it worked so well, even though the code words were up in 600 code words that we all have to remember. And they have to remember it instantly as somebody start repeating it over the air to write it down.
Peter explains the Navajo Code and how a Navajo Code Talker would translate the message.
A company of Marines were pinned down on the north side of the Iwo Jima Island, just north of the airport. They were terribly pinned down. So commander wanted help. Writes a message and gives it to a Navajo Code Talker, covering the front line. He sends it to the command post by the beach asking for help. And here's what he said. De be na achipi that is tai de na sonse tanji lo chin li da tsa ta has ta na ki shash. Well, If a Navajo was listening in out here, hearing this message, what did they hear? This Navajo Code Talker giving a message to ask for help, saying in Navajo. Here's what he said in Navajo. Tepe na achipi means sheep, eyes, nose, deer. Dadiltahi, destroyers. De nas onse, tea, mouse. Taji lochin, turkey, onion. Lidatsa, sick horse. Tra has tra na ki, shush. 3, 6, 2, bear. Does that sound like asking for help? So even a Navajo out here listening could not understand except this guy's talking about sheep, eyes, nose, deer, sick horse, turkey, onion, all of that stuff. But the code talker down at the command post by the beach to whom the message is sent writes down immediately as he hears this, send demolition team to Hill 362B. Immediately, flamethrower tanks and demolition crew went out to save this company of Marines that were pinned down. So that's how the Navajo Code, just give you just a small sample of how it was used to save thousands of lives and also to help pinpoint where the enemies were. And it's an amazing story. And every one of these code talkers that are still alive and those that pass on have their own stories of how things happen.
MacDonald received his engineering degree from the University of Oklahoma in 1957.
Finish it. While I was still at University of Oklahoma, English professor I had at Bacone came to visit me. He said he got his doctorate degree from Tulsa University, using me as a subject for his dissertation. Why did Peter MacDonald fail this particular IQ test when he was making good grades? So he said, without going into a lot of explanation, I just want to tell you this, that if Einstein had taken that same test written in Navajo, using Navajo setting, Navajo culture, Einstein would have come out a moron too. So you're okay. So that made me okay. And so this challenge of that I'm not this or I'm not that, I'm okay kind of thing, really brought me up there and graduated. When I graduated, I went to work for Howard Hughes and with engineering. Some of the engineers that he hired. So when I was working there, this is again another thing that led to leadership thing you're talking about. How did you get interested or become a leader? Well, it really came about in this crazy way. That one way was people challenging my intelligence, and that I may be a moron, and I'm saying no, I'm not. I'll show you.
Hey ya tanga show ya tanga show ya tanga show ya tanga show ya na ya na le got the tanga show ya tanga show ya na ya na le got the tanga show ya tanga show ya tanga show ya tanga show ya tanga show